George Robert Twelves Hughes was born in Boston on August 25, 1742. George became a shoemaker because he was born into a poor family with no connections and lacked the brawn and height, only reaching 5 foot 1 inches to do other jobs such as a rope worker, a housewright, and a shipwright. George tried to escape his apprenticeship by joining the military, but was turned down for being too small. He was married to his wife for 70 years and had many children, so many he couldn't remember how many he had. When the boycott came around, you'd think things would go well for George, but Americans bought most of their shoes from a town called Lynn, which was becoming known for selling cheap shoes and outcompeted George. This ended up putting him at an even greater disadvantage. By 1771, he was far from the political sphere, not even owning enough property to qualify as a voter. In late 1762 or early 1763, George Hughes repaired a shoe for John Hancock and was consequently invited to the Hancock residence on New Year's Day. On that day, George put on his best jacket, knocked on the front door, and took his hat off. Hancock invited Hughes to take a seat and have a glass of wine. All the while, Hughes was scared almost to death and hastened to make his bow again and secure his retreat. This is a demonstration of deference before the Revolution.
On March 5, 1770, the Boston Massacre took place. Prior to this, he had been personally cheated by a soldier and witnessed others being victimized by other British soldiers as well. 2 days before the massacre, Hughes also witnessed a fight between civilian workers and British soldiers who were attempting to take their jobs. The soldiers were badly beaten and sought revenge. On the day of the massacre, Hughes said that he should defend his fellow townsmen against the soldiers. He stood unarmed in the crowd and watched as a young barber's apprentice tried to collect a debt owed to him by a British officer. He viewed the civilians as defenseless and testified on this account. This was the turning point for Hughes. After the atrocities he had witnessed on the days leading up to and at the massacre, he was stirred into political action and joined the radical opposition.
Hughes volunteered and became the kind of leader for whom most historians have never found a place. He was singled out of the rank and file and made an officer in the field. Hughes was one of the last survivors of the Tea Party and wrote an account of his experience in a memoir. He said, "No disorder took place during that transaction, and it was observed at the time that the stillest night ensued that Boston had enjoyed for many months." The Tea Party wasn't as chaotic as it looked. He also states, "I made the demand accordingly, and the captain promptly replied and delivered the articles, but requested me at the same time to do no damage to the ship or rigging." Hughes also gives an account of chasing after people who would take some of the tea for themselves, which was highly unacceptable and did not go without punishment. Hughes and Hancock broke open the same chests at the Tea Party, which became a symbol for equality among classes. Hughes won public recognition for an act of courage that almost cost his life and precipitated the most publicized tarring and feathering of the Revolution. On January 25, 1774, Hughes was walking home and saw John Malcolm, an employee of the Customs Service, standing over a small boy, threatening him with his cane. Malcolm beat Hughes with his cane, and a crowd later took Malcolm from his house. The crowd proceeded to tar and feather Malcolm as punishment, as well as ostracize him. Hughes had precipitated an event that promoted the Committee for Tarring and Feathering and use of crowd control. Hughes was at odds with the crowds and wanted justice from the courts, not a mob. He disliked the cruel punishment of man.